excited to be joined today by Ryan Hamilton. Ryan is an applied sports psychologist with research spanning two major streams of inquiry. One, the application of psychology to sport and exercise performance, and number two, the development of hope and coping in cancer survivors. Beyond his research, he is a passionate teacher who applies innovative approaches in the classroom at the University of New Brunswick and supports the learning and personal development of his students. He also works with the UNB Reds varsity teams, individual student athletes at UNB, the Canadian Sports Centre, Hockey Canada, and is a recent Stanley Cup champion with the National Hockey League's Tampa Bay Lightning. Ryan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure.
Now, I guess you're in a hotel room, in your role as Tampa Bay Lightning's, mental performance coach and kind of doing your quarantine bit to help the team in their performance, later on, I guess.
Yeah, it's certainly a unique year. My relationship with the Lightning is I spend about 10 days a month with the organization under typical circumstances, but these aren't typical. Yep. So I've been spending big chunks of time because of the quarantine. So it's 7 days of quarantining before I can join the team when I get to Florida. And then it's 14 days of quarantine when I get back to New Brunswick, where I live. Yeah. So I've been taking it on in bigger chunks. So it'll be about, I'll have my quarantine and spend about 3 weeks with the group before heading home and then managing all my other responsibilities via Zoom.
Yeah. Now the teaching environment obviously is probably mostly virtual right now at the University of New Brunswick.
Yeah, we're other than sort of lab courses and some practical courses and like for our nurses and so on and our graduate courses, our undergraduate offerings are all online. So I've been teaching from hotels and bubbles and all sorts of environments over the course of the last year.
Now, you as I mentioned, you're involved with Hockey Canada, specifically the World Junior Team. Were you part of that bubble in Alberta for in the springtime? In the fall?
Yeah, yes, I was. So I spent July 26th to September 29th with the Lightning in the bubble. And then I rejoined the bubble at Edmonton the first week of December. And then I was with the World Junior Team until the end of the event before coming down to Tampa after that. So, I was there, and it's challenging. There are all sorts of challenges to being in the bubble, but there are also all sorts of pretty cool activities, and you start thinking about shared sacrifice and shared purpose and building family, especially over the holidays with that group. It was. We won a silver medal, which wasn't the goal, but I don't know. I look back at it as being a pretty special time, for all of us.
Yeah, I think, you're touching on a number of different amazing experiences in what's been a pretty unique and challenging year. It sounds like there could be a future book down the road with all these experiences, Bubble Boy or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I sometimes I get that thought of, maybe I should write a book, but geez, I can hardly write down half a page of a journal. So I don't know about writing a book.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting stories coming out of this. Well, your role with athletes is probably very multifaceted, and you have interactions with coaches and administrators and athletes. But today I really wanted to focus in on, the coach's role and understanding performance anxiety and kind of how the coach plays into that. And so I think for people who are listening, how would you define performance anxiety from the context of an athlete?
Yeah, so I guess we start with having an understanding of what anxiety is, and then the performance piece is just a context to it, if you will. But anxiety, there has both sort of physical and cognitive components to it. And I won't go too deep with it, but if I'm thinking about the cognitive components of anxiety, so the things that we're thinking or the beliefs that we're holding, typically around uncertainty, around what if this happens, what if that happens, and typically not like, what if I win, but more so like, what if I lose, or what if I turn the puck over, what if I mess up on this shift, or whatever it might be. So it's that what ifs, that those ruminations and those projections into the future. So anxiety has this forward looking component to it, where it attaches itself to something negative that might happen in the future. So so this racing mind, hamster wheel thoughts kind of a thing.
Overthinking to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a part of it. And then on the physical side, it's those typical things that probably any coach has felt, and probably on the cognitive side too. But when we think about those physical things, it is that racing heart, the tightening of the chest, the struggle to get a full breath, so the respiration rate is high. It is the knots in the stomach a little bit, and that feeling of jitteriness. And when it gets even more extreme, it starts to get like almost like a blanking out, almost like a feeling of floating. And that's when it's, athletes are starting to get close to actually losing consciousness and fainting. Yeah. So that's at the extreme end of it. And I think all of us, experience anxiety cognitively in terms of our thoughts get away from us and we start to worry about the future in a non-helpful way. And I think we've all experienced that physical anxiety as well. And so those are the sort of somatic and cognitive anxiety components that are pretty consistent. And so when it comes to performance anxiety is typically related to a performance-based context. So it's a game, it's a match, it's a tryout, and there's this element of pressure that comes into play, and it's pressure typically that's driving this. So what is pressure? Well, pressure is really driven by expectations, sometimes from outside and sometimes from inside. Like this is a time where I want to perform really, really well. And then wrapped up in that is there are consequences to not performing well. And it's not like that there's a second chance to do this over a few hours later. So there's this combination of, I want to have success in this. The success is not guaranteed. And typically I've invested a lot in this thing that I want to have success in. So there's that culmination. And so the cognitive piece is, well, what if I blow it? What if I don't do well? And then the physical piece is all of that tightening and acceleration of the heart rate. So
it's funny because you mentioned that some of the physical feelings, like the butterflies and the jitteriness, and when I listen to you explain that, the concept of flow and in the zone, or those concepts that you hear a lot of where athletes say, I was almost unconscious. I was just kind of in there. And I'm not a professional athlete, but some of those, some of those traits or some of those look-fors sound kind of similar to that flow state where athletes are at their premium, expectation or premium performance. So what differentiates between, it becoming anxiety? Is it that forward-looking, the worry, or, what makes it different from being in the zone or in that flow state?
That flow state is, it is the magic. It's that thing that we all crave. And I think it's one of those things that we crave so much because we go there so infrequently, but there's a few elements of flow. With flow, there's a suspension of time a little bit, and there's an extreme sort of suspension of self-awareness. So once you start talking about being in flow, you're not in flow anymore because you have the degree of awareness. And flow and anxiety are actually kind of at opposite ends of a spectrum. So there's a certain level of arousal that's required to experience either. But one of the things that happens with performance anxiety is we're very aware of ourselves and our performance and what's at stake and what are the costs and what are the risks. And when we're in flow, we're just kind of in the task and in the performance, and the outside world doesn't really matter very much. So that would be a big difference. Flow is almost always experienced as a positive state. Performance anxiety is almost experienced as a negative state to be in.
I just meant more along the lines of, I meant more along the lines of that feeling, because you hear athletes sometimes say like the nervous energy, like I guess it gets to a point where that it kind of forks, right? The feeling of anticipation and excitement can lead to flow and lead to anxiety, where now you have two things that are kind of polar opposite of one another.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the gateways into flow, and I've got to be honest, in my work, I talk very little about flow. Like
Yeah.
I'm more interested in having the athletes that I work with know how to have success with their B and B plus game
Yep.
than how to get them to the A plus plus.
Right.
And I sort of think about the flow as being A plus plus, but there's so many things that are going on in an athlete's life that they have to manage that actually makes getting into the zone a big time challenge. So I focus more on, well, what can we do when we're not in the zone? How can we still have success?
That sounds like a very hockey way to think of this. I mean, I've grown up in hockey, and hockey's a very pragmatic game for the most part. And that sounds like, would I get the same if I were talking to an Olympic athlete who, has to get to a point, less frequently than a hockey player? They don't play every second night. Do you think they would say the same thing in that instance? Would your focus be different, I guess?
Well, I mean, I work with Olympic athletes, and so be they wrestlers or athletes in track and field and so on. And we don't talk a lot about flow. We talk about getting into that optimal performance state, which may or may not tip them into that flow experience. But I think it's one of the things, it's kind of like if you're looking to see if you're asleep, you're not asleep, right? So sleep's really important, but we can't make ourselves go to sleep. So we have to put ourselves in those conditions so that sleep can happen.
Yeah.
And I think about flow the same way, that if we're checking to see if we're in flow, then we're not. Right. So what do? Well, what are our routines that have us physically, mentally, instrumentally ready to perform at the highest level? And if that tips into flow, well, that's great. But if not, even if it doesn't, I'm in a really good spot here to perform. So that's what we focus on. I mean, if I could induce flow, this wouldn't be the only podcast I'd be appearing on this week.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You know what I mean? So it's more about that work of having good routines. And a part of, you're never going to find flow is if you're in a very anxious state, because the internalizing that occurs with anxiety just prohibits that. And so in some ways, having strategies that deal with performance anxiety set us up to be able to perform to our best, and possibly could tip us into that flow state as well.
Now, I guess from the youth, I mean, the majority of listeners are going to be coaching, youths that are between the ages of 12 and 18 for the most part. So, from your experience in dealing, I mean, you deal with that age group as well, the upper end of that age group with Hockey Canada, but, how does that manifest itself? Like, as a coach, what are we looking to see from an athlete that would tip us off that they struggle with performance anxiety?
Yeah. I think one of the things that you'd look for is change in behavior, right? And it's not to assume that if they're doing something a little bit differently that they're necessarily anxious. But one of the things you could look for is that change in behavior. So, well, what would a change in behavior look like associated with performance anxiety? If the person is typically kind of outgoing and energetic, and they become very internal there and are kind of keeping to themselves, they're going in the cocoon a little bit. Like they're trying to protect themselves from the situation that they're finding themselves in. And you'll say, hey, Jimmy, everything good? Yeah, no, I'm good. Jimmy, you don't seem like yourself. Yeah, no, I'm just getting focused. Okay, all right. Okay, well, we'll accept that, but it might be worth exploring with Jimmy the next day. What actually was going on. If they're complaining about their stomach, it might be that they just had 2 Big Macs, right? And they're not managing their nutrition the way they need to before their baseball game or soccer game or hockey game. Or it could also be that their belly's really sensitive, and you'd start to get like an irritable bowels symptomatology that's developing. So sensitive stomach might be another thing that would clue us in. And then you would look for errors of hesitancy or of omission. And I see this. I coach youth baseball, and the kids that are more anxiety prone or are experiencing more performance anxiety, geez, they're going to be more likely to watch the third strike than take a big hack at it.
Yeah.
They're going to be more likely to back up on the ground ball that's hit to them versus go and get it. Yeah. They're going to be more likely to shade themselves away from where the ball is going to be hit, to shade themselves to it.
Yeah.
They're looking to avoid failure. And so I think, obviously, the culture that you set as a coach is, well, what's your tolerance for failure? Yep. Do you celebrate it or do you punish it? And there's all sorts of things to get into there. But I think looking for that trepidation, that trying not to make a mistake, that being on the heels is also a sign of performance anxiety, especially if that's a change from what you might typically see in a practice environment.
Right. And I guess you touched on it. You used the word culture and, how you react to, moments of failure in your athletes. I guess, from a coaching standpoint, like what are some strategies for us? Well, first off, you mentioned how do we can help identify some of these things, but, beyond, building a great culture and helping players learn through mistakes, what are some other things that you think coaches, are either responsible for or can improve upon to help build an environment where, performance anxiety becomes, less of a thing?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, because coaches do play a significant role in the mindset of the athlete. So if I could I'll take a bit of a step back out of this, and this might be a helpful model for you to consider. And it's not necessarily this way, but I think it might be helpful to think about it. What if we put anxiety on one end of a spectrum and we put self-confidence on the other end of a spectrum? And so there are various things that we can do that are going to push the athlete closer to anxiety or push the athlete closer to feeling confident. Yeah. And while it is possible to be anxious and still have belief in oneself, so I don't necessarily think about these two things as on the same continuum, but it might be helpful for this. So what are those things that will shove an athlete one way or the other? So I'll give you 5. Number 1, past performance, right? So if the athlete has been performing really poorly, either in training or in practice, and just aren't getting the job done, well, when more performances are coming up, they might be more anxious about it. What if I lose again? What if I screw up again? What if I let the team down? Versus if they're really contributing in a meaningful way, then they're more likely to be like, okay, yeah, I believe I can keep doing this type of thing. Now, for the athlete that has been struggling, I think the coaches have a role in giving them chances to succeed in their training environment, whether that be in practices, in the gym, in dry land, in team meetings, but thinking about their strengths, thinking about what they do well, and give them a chance to feel competent, to feel like they're contributing in a meaningful way. So past performance is 1. Number 2 is preparation. So, if you're thinking about giving a speech at your best friend's wedding, right? And so you've been asked to give this speech, and it's coming up in the next 15 minutes, and you've put zero thought into it, and you have no idea what you're going to say, and you look around, there's 150 people there. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, how do I get out of this speech? Or you just down half a bottle of wine and just see what happens, right? Like, and
then it goes amazingly well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least it'll be memorable.
Yeah,
exactly. But when we haven't prepared for something, we're going to be more anxious about it than when we have prepared. And so obviously we value training and preparation and hard work and all those things. But I think talking about the value of that from a confidence perspective is also important. So I think about providing athletes with consistent, purposeful, and impactful preparation. and then connecting, like, this was an awesome workout. This was a great training session. You're getting better at this. I noticed your hands today. I noticed your footwork, whatever it might be, but emphasizing preparation, and because that's something that the athlete can control. They can't control that they gave up 4 goals in the third period on Saturday night anymore. It's over, but they can control the work that they're doing now.
Can you be over prepared?
You can be overtrained. So there's the physiological side of being overtrained and going too far.
But mentally, like, is there a point where, and I don't think anyone would argue preparation is a good thing. There's probably, in your experience, do you see a moment or a point at where some athletes hit the point where they're over prepared, where it causes overthinking and almost robotic nature to the way they play?
So I think you could, I believe you could overthink. I met with an athlete yesterday, and we had a conversation about this, and he's, okay, I got to protect his identity, so I can't say too much, but he is trying to make an impression. He's trying to do his best, and he's in a new environment. And the different coach, different expectations, and he's trying to remember 1,000 things, like he's like, I got to be here on the PK. I got to be this. I'm doing that. And then, all right, I got to be second quick on the forecheck. And then I got to finish and above. And it's like all these things that he's trying to remember. And it's overwhelming to him. I said, listen, so our conversation was, if you have 10 priorities, you have 0. So let's just focus on a couple of things. So I think preparation is where we are super conscious. We're super diligent. We're on task. We're deliberate with everything that we do. And then when it comes time to perform, we carry a couple priorities in with us, but we don't have to remember the checklist of 100 things. Remembering 100 things on the checklist doesn't make you do them. Oh, I remember them, but the game is going to happen. So I think it's important to let it happen. Now, so I think it's different things. Over prepared for me would mean the ratio of work to rest is not adequate, because growth comes from taking the system to an uncomfortable place and then giving the system the chance to recover and consolidate everything. So that is that ratio. So I don't know, like, I rarely run into an over-prepared athlete. Sometimes what a lot of preparation will do to the athlete, but this has nothing to do with the preparation, is they think, oh my God, I've done everything right. I better not screw it up now. Like, if I screw it up now, what am I going to blame it on? But that's not, that has nothing to do with being ready. That has everything to do with just how they're thinking about their performance. So we have past performance, we have preparation. Here's 2 big ones for coaches. The first is verbal feedback. So athletes are going to take confidence cues from their coaches. And being aware of the nature of the feedback that you give is important. Athletes don't want to be lied to. They don't want to be told that they're doing great when they're doing poor. They don't want to be told that, like, that was a great shot when it 3-hopped on its way to the net. Like, like, they don't want to be lied to. But they do, especially when they're struggling, they really will respond to genuine positive feedback. So it's not like, oh my God, Susie struck out 3 times yesterday in her softball game. I'm going to go tell her that her swing looks good because I don't want her confidence to be hurt. Susie's not going to be picking that up, right? It's not going to, it's not going to verify something she believes about herself. So the idea is to give something else. You look great, your arm's strong, I love your leadership in the outfield, whatever it might be, but it's finding some things for Susie to latch on to while she's working her way through that other piece. So that's verbal feedback. So timing is important, but amount is important, and being specific about it is really important, not just good job. Good job isn't feedback.
And then being authentic, obviously, is probably the most important, right?
100%. Yeah, that's a good point. So then there's the nonverbal feedback stuff, and athletes are super in tune to this. And the problem is athletes think that every coach's decision is about them.
Yep.
Like, I have to remind athletes sometimes that there are actually 19 other people who wore a uniform tonight at the game. Like, the coach wasn't just coaching you, but athletes, especially when things aren't going great, they internalize the coach's decisions. So if you don't put me over the boards in the last 5 minutes of the game, it might have been that you forgot me. It might have been that you had two other lines that were really going good. It might have been that we needed a goal. The team needed a goal and we put our best offensive players out there. Or it might have been we needed to shut down, and you're one of our best offensive players. We need to protect the lead. So we didn't. It could have been any number of things. Other guys are playing great. Your line mate get injured and I didn't know where to fit you. Like, it could be anything, but the athlete will often say, oh, geez, the coach is doing that to me. So that, which is not right. But I think it's important just as coaches to be aware. It's funny, like when we've done this a couple of times with the World Junior team, it's the day after we've named the roster. So everybody has had a particular high, like, oh my God, childhood dream coming true. I'm on the World Junior team. And then they go to their practice the next day and the lineup is posted. And there's like, oh, I made the team, but I'm the 13th forward. Or, oh, I made the team, but I'm the fourth line left winger. I'm a center and I want to be on the top two lines. So here's something that we do sometimes. We put every possible combination of lines on the wall. So you walk in on one sheet, it's like, oh, I'm on the first line. Then you look at the sheet right next to it. It's like, no, I'm on the third line. Oh, I'm on the second line. And so they're in the right positions. This is the position you're going to be practicing in today. But the order of the lines are all mixed up. You've got a number one and a number two goalie. Then on another sheet, they're flipped around. This is, this might sound a little bit silly, but it does open up the gates for a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody here adds value. Everybody here is going to contribute. Don't worry. Don't get caught up on what line you're in or your ice time or those types of things. You're always going to have a chance to add value. The point in all this for coaches, though, is that athletes respond to verbal feedback and they also respond to nonverbal feedback. So
I mean, I know from my experience, the last piece you said, I mean, like how you write things sometimes on a lineup sheet and it matters, like, and the message could be as easy in my instance where it's an old lineup sheet and the order doesn't even matter to me. And it was the quickest way to get things done. But you're right. Those little details, the athletes are really highly attuned to kind of the nuance of some of those things.
I've been at many NHL hockey games where I'll go into the coach's office after the game and they'll be debriefing and I'll just be sitting and listening and so on. And they'll be talking about a particular player and they'll be like, you know what, I really liked his game tonight. He's making a lot of progress and, he did some good things. He helped us win. And then I'll leave the coach's office and then I'll go out into the gym where the athletes are cooling down and I'll just be sitting around and hanging out. And that particular player might be sitting near to me and he's like, and he might whisper to me like, these coaches are crazy. Like, they friggin' won't even play me. Like, and they'll have the time on ice sheet. It's like, I only played 9 minutes, 14 seconds tonight. Like, what is going on? And I won't tell him, well, the coaches just said you're playing great. Like, I got to protect confidentiality going both ways.
Yeah.
But it's just like, well, can we expand your view of the role that you have and how you're contributing beyond that ice time? So even things like time on ice or where you are in the batting lineup, or did you come off the bench or did you start? I think it's important if you value the athlete, and what they're doing and how they're playing, to give them the verbal feedback if the nonverbal feedback isn't matching up with how you're actually feeling about them.
Right. And
then the last piece quickly is just what athletes think about, right? And so this is where I do the bulk of my work. So if we go past performance, preparation, verbal feedback, nonverbal feedback, we have what we call cognitive emotional regulation. So how athletes think and feel. And so I really encourage athletes to focus on growth, to focus on solutions, look, those are a couple of the major things, and then to focus on their strengths and intentions. So versus focus on uncertainties, focus on weaknesses, focus on, you know, how you're getting screwed or whatever, that type of stuff that's going on. So that's the big list of things that can shove an athlete closer to anxiety or closer.
Well, I guess the flip side of those things are, that's how coaches help build confidence. I mean, if we're using that continuum of anxiety and, you know, confidence or performance, then I would think that, you know, helping athletes be prepared, you know, drawing attention to past performances that were, you know, successful or good or whatever word you want to use, you know, being really aware of, you know, verbal feedback, as you said, your nonverbal and how you interact in other ways, you know, all of those things contribute to building confidence, which is kind of where we're trying to get as coaches, is to kind of have confident, high performing athletes, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and then this has been a bias in my coaching, and maybe it's because I personally don't get wrapped up in my coaching. You know, my coaching is something that I do to contribute to the community and give back to the community. But I'm not a particularly good technical coach. You know, I'm always an assistant coach on a team, and they see my value add from the mental performance side, and so my self-esteem doesn't get wrapped up in the results of the team. I care about the results for the team, but it doesn't impact me much. So maybe I have a weird bias when I look at this.
Yeah.
But my idea is, if Nate bobbles the ball at second base on a 2-hopper and the guy reaches on an error, and then Nate again gets another shot at him and he bobbles the ball and another guy reaches on an error and a run scores, they end up scoring 5 runs in the inning. Nate is going to be told when he comes in, hey buddy, you got an at bat coming up, go rip at it. And guess what? You're going back out there and you're playing second base again.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's go through failure. It's not like, oh, Nate failed the audit. You know, he failed the audit. He's left fielder for the rest of his life. It's no, let's get back out there.
Yeah.
And let's do it. And Nate might say, Coach, I think it's best for the team if maybe I take an inning off.
Right.
No, Nate.
No, back at it.
Best for the team. Maybe it's best for the team right now today, but it's best for the team in the long run if you're fielding ground balls cleanly. So let's go back out and field these ground balls, man.
Now, how do you see that come to light in the professional setting, where you know, jobs are on the line and, you know, there's multi-million-dollar amounts of money that, you know, hinge on, you know, Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup is good for the bottom line. It's great for people to feel good about what they're doing and you're moving towards a common goal and the players perform well. But the other flip side of this, from an owner's standpoint, they're motivated to win, but that's good for the bottom line. How do you find that ideal, or that, you know, belief of, you know, we're going to ride through this? You know, how does that come to play in the professional setting? Just purely out of, you know, interest.
Yeah, it's a good question. Not quite the same way that it happens when you're coaching 13-year-old baseball players.
For sure.
There's a couple of things. So let me give you an example that's similar to the example. A number of years ago, we called up a player in Tampa, a guy named Luke Witkowski. And Luke's a great guy, and he's still a part of the organization. He's actually the captain in Syracuse still. And he's playing his first NHL game. And we had Rick Bowness was coaching our D at the time. And Luke told me about a conversation that he had with Rick. And this has been out in the public, so I feel comfortable to share it.
Yep.
But essentially, during the game, or during the game has started, Luke's still on the bench. He hasn't played his first shift yet. And Rick went up behind him and said, hey, Ski, if you go out there right now and you turn that friggin' puck over and that leads to a goal against, you know what's going to happen to you? And Luke's like, probably not going to play another shift and probably should pack my bags to go to Syracuse. He's like, no, I'm going to put you right back out there next shift. He's like, just have fun, kid. Like, just go play.
Yeah.
So that's an example of, you have a young guy coming up, making his debut, performance anxiety is through the roof.
Yep.
He wants to have success. And you know what? If this player turns into a great player, it's awesome for the team. So there's room for growth and development and struggle. And right now we're trying lots of young guys in our lineup, the Alex Barry-Boulets and Ross Coltons and so on. All these guys are getting a chance to play and giving some runway to fail a little bit, because we want to see what we've got and we want to see, you know, what's going to happen down the stretch. Having said that, one turnover by a veteran player could result in them not being in the game the next night. And one turnover by a rookie player could result in them not being in the game the next night. Then the team plays great, the replacement plays great, and they might not see the ice again.
Yep.
For weeks or months or for the organization like that. So it is that degree of I don't want it to sound like there's an even balance between letting guys fail and putting them in positions to fail and fail again and fail again. You're going to figure it out, versus either get the job done or you're out of here. Yep. It's much more get the job done or you're out of here in pro sport.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the magic, you know, is for coaches at the youth level to understand the difference between youth sport and professional sport. And I think that's a constant struggle, because people are competitive, they're ambitious, and I guess as coaches helping create that culture that, you know, we learn through process, we learn through, you know, the ups and the downs, is kind of, you know, hopefully the magic bullet for all of us as coaches, whether, you know, we're coaching kids or professionals.
Like, what an outcome as a coach, you know, to teach an athlete how to deal with failure.
Yeah.
And to come out the other side of it, you know.
Sure.
And you know what? Like, does Nate remember of that the score of that game against the St. John Pirates? He doesn't, but he probably remembers that all of his coaches were like, "Hey, bud, like, let's keep her going."
Yeah, I guess it's that adage, right? Like, you know, they don't really care how much you know until they know you care and or care about them. So really appreciate your time, Ryan. I think, you know, you offered a lot of tangible things and things that, you know, coaches can help, you know, do right away. Just, you know, being aware of how they interact is just a small little detail that I think, you know, plays a huge role in players building confidence, and then on the flip side of that, managing some anxieties when things don't go the way they want them to go. So appreciate your time. Good luck with the remainder of your quarantine or isolation or whatever you want to call it. And I guess for Leaf fans who might be listening, hopefully it doesn't turn out where Tampa Bay is eliminating the Leafs in the playoffs come the spring. But for your sake, you got a lot of fingers for Stanley Cup rings. So good luck with with that drive and everything else.
Well, I hope for the sake of Leaf fans and for the sake of Lightning fans that we're fortunate enough to get that far and meet. We'll be doing some good things if that was to happen.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure, man.